Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. You know who hasn't been a tough couple days for? Mark Pope and the Kentucky Wildcats. Okay, so we've talked, obviously. Listen, first of all, we've come full circle on Mark Pope. Okay, so first of all, let me say this. I had a bunch of people in the comments today on Twitter. Oh, Torres, you're the guy that said Pope can't land anybody. Listen to the segment that I did at the Final Four. There was a question on a thumbnail that said time to panic or cause for concern or something. But if you listen to the video that I did at the Final Four, I said, take a deep breath, Kentucky fans. Kentucky is always going to get their guys. Well, they got another one on Monday, and it might, in fact, be the final guy that they get of major influence and major significance this offseason, as on Monday, Denzel Aberdeen, the sixth man of the Florida Gators national championship team, he went in the portal on Friday. By Monday, he is officially a Kentucky Wildcat. Big move, big addition. I love this addition. Love what it says about the 25-26 Kentucky Wildcats. And by the way, let me say this. I think it says something very definitive about what Mark Pope wants to do this offseason and what he wants his 25-26 roster to look like. So let's go ahead and dive in. As always, make sure you follow our Torres on UK page. That is for all of your late-breaking Kentucky news. Shout out to Mark, our intern who runs it, helps me run it as well. Also, obviously, as always, our Hope and Pope t-shirts at aarontorresonline.com/merchandise. All right, so Denzel Aberdeen, really interesting player. He was actually a very, if you're like a real college basketball diehard, and if you're watching this show in April, you are. He was a guy that if you watch Florida, everybody loved Walter Clayton, and with good reason. Will Richard, Elijah Martin. Every time Denzel Aberdeen came in, good things happened. Finishes the season as the team's sixth man, 7.5 points per game, 35% three-point shooting. Couple things. One, when you actually watch the games, I think it was pretty obvious that basically he was actually, like for basically anyone else in college basketball, he could have started. They had 3 fifth-year seniors. One of them is going to be a top 15 pick in the NBA draft in Walter Clayton. The other two were very good college guards. I think they could get a cup of coffee in the NBA. But two, the other thing was when Denzel Aberdeen was thrown into the fire as a starter, he was a very good player. 14.5 points per game, 41% three-point shooting in games in which he was a starter. So just because he wasn't technically a starter all season, just because he didn't play starters minutes, doesn't mean that he's not capable. And that, to me, is what stands out about this addition. Now, it's funny, by the way, I'll say this really quick. You know, I saw a lot of negativity about him even entering the portal. How can he leave? He's going to be a starter, reigning national champs. He's from Florida. Listen, this is the new world. And I think what's important to note, Denzel Aberdeen is a very good player that was very in demand and probably not an NBA player, though. And so, like, for me, I don't have a problem with him entering the portal because next year he can make literal life-changing money, and it might be the best money that he ever makes the rest of his career. So I had no problem with him entering, but I do think that he is a better guard that he's being given credit for. Again, 7.5 points per game, 35% shooting doesn't stand out, but 14.5 points per game, 41% shooting from three in games that he started. He is a very good player. I'm here to tell you, like I said, if he went to probably 350 of 360 other schools, he would have started. He would have put up big minutes. He just so happened to be playing in probably the most loaded backcourt in college basketball. Because of that, I'll also say this. I think there's a misconception about Denzel Aberdeen and the role that he will have at Kentucky. I've seen a lot of people say, oh, you know, why are you leaving to be a sixth man at Kentucky or this or that or the other thing? I don't think he's going to be a sixth man. I think when I look at Kentucky, it's very clear to me how Mark Pope wants to use his backcourt. Assuming Otega Oweh comes back, here's what I think the plan is. I think the plan is Jalen Lowe at point guard. Of course, that's the point guard who was at Pitt, 17.5 points per game, 5.5 assists per game. That's going to be your point guard. I don't think that's a surprise. Otega Owe, your best player this year from start to finish, no injuries, was reliable. He's testing the NBA draft process, but my assumption right now is as good as he is as a college player, he will be back and playing college basketball next year. He's going to, frankly, make more money playing in college next year than he would have. He's going to be one of your guards. And then I think Denzel Aberdeen is going to be in the backcourt as well. Mark Pope is probably going to start 3 guys in the backcourt. You know what that reminds me of? How about this year when he did the exact same thing? It was Lamont Butler, Otega Owe, and Jackson Robinson for most of the season. Kobe Brea got a few starts late. There were some other guys that kind of came in and out of the lineup. And then I think at the 4-5 spot, what you're going to have is probably to start the year, if Jaden Quaintance isn't ready to go, Mo Diabate from Alabama will be your starting 4, and Brandon Garrison will be your starting 5. And then when Jaden Quaintance comes back, you either move Mo Diabate to the bench or you move Brandon Garrison to the bench. And Jaden Quaintance, when he's healthy, he will then be your starting 5 or your starting 4 man. A couple things on Jaden Quaintance. I know this is a Denzel Aberdeen segment, but one, I know that one thing from the Quaintance camp was that I don't think that they thought he was just a 5-man. In other words, I think at Arizona State, and we've talked about this, they felt like he got thrown into the post, park your butt down there, offensive rebound, whatever. And I think they feel like he has a lot more to show off in his skill set. So I believe that he will be playing more minutes at the 4 than maybe he did at Arizona State. Doesn't mean he can't play at the 5. And I actually think you can play him and Brandon Garrison together. Now, he's got to prove that he can do it game after game after game. That's after proving that he's healthy. But then also, if you want to go small, you could play Mo Diabate at the 5, probably start Jaden Quaintance at the 4, and or Jaden Quaintance at the 5 and have Brandon Garrison come off the bench. And so to me, I don't think Denzel Aberdeen is going anywhere to be the 6th man. He was the 6th man last year. I think he's going to start at Kentucky, and I think he's going to contribute and play right away. What this says, though, and this to me is the important part, okay, is I think there's a bigger picture story and a bigger picture narrative about Kentucky basketball and about what Mark Pope wants to do with his second roster, wanted to do, and now has successfully done. What this says to me is very clearly this, is that Mark Pope this past year realized that as skilled as that Kentucky team was, it simply was not athletic enough. It needed to get more athletic. It needed to get bigger. It needed to get more physical. And most importantly, like I said, it needed to be more athletic. And I think to the credit of Mark Pope, Hope and Pope, baby, he came through and he delivered, okay? And so you look at the situation with Kentucky last year. Listen, it was a great story. By the way, say whatever you want about me. I said in the preseason, this notion that they weren't a top 25 team, I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. I said Kentucky is going to be a top 25 team. They're better than people are giving them credit for, okay? And it was basically based mostly on skill. Mark Pope kind of brought that BYU system, that BYU offense with him. And basically, listen, I think part of it was he wanted to do kind of the opposite of what the previous coaching staff had done. He wanted to get older. He wanted veterans. He wanted grown-ups. He wanted guys that he knew could handle the stage of Kentucky. And so he did it. He added Jackson Robinson. He added Kobe Brea. He added Andrew Carr. He added this guy, that guy, whatever. But then what I think happened by the end of the year, you get an injury or two, and all of a sudden, you realize skill only gets you so far, right? Lamont Butler, to his credit, was basically playing the second half of the year with one shoulder. You feel awful for Lamont that his career couldn't have ended better and on a more healthy note. But at the same time, he's kind of not the guy that you thought he was. He wasn't the guy that he was in December and January by the end of the year just because of the injuries. That's not a knock on him. It's just a reality. Jackson Robinson is out. Now, all of a sudden, again, a Kobe Brea, who you were hoping to be your 6th guy, shoots threes off the bench. Now he's got to play starters minutes. Now a guy like Trent Noah, a guy like Colin Chandler, they have to play more minutes than you were expecting. And you could just see by the end of the year, Kentucky just didn't have the horses. They just didn't have the dudes to compete with the best teams in college basketball. Alabama in the SEC tournament, it wasn't close, and we know it. And it's okay. It's not a knock because you were playing a bunch of guys that you didn't want to play. Also, Tennessee, I know you beat them twice in the regular season. You get to the NCAA tournament, they were just so much more athletic and physical than the Wildcats were. It's not a knock. It's just a reality. And so I think what Mark Pope very much prioritized, and we've talked about it all offseason, we need dudes. We need alphas. We need dudes that when stuff goes wrong, when things aren't perfect, when the play isn't executed flawlessly, that can just go make stuff happen, right? Mo Diabate is a guy that can just get you 2 offensive rebounds on a given possession and make stuff happen. And, he's not going to get pushed around. He's not going to get shoved around. He's crazy athletic. He's done it in the SEC. Jalen Lowe is a guy that can get you a bucket, can get somebody else a bucket. You look at the guy they just added today, Denzel Aberdeen. He's a guy, 41% three-point shooter in his starts, but also a guy that is a great finisher at the rim, and he's not intimidated by big moments. He only had 7 points in the national championship game, but he carried Florida for a big stretch of that national championship game during that, when Florida was struggling. Will Richard was great in the first half. Denzel Aberdeen was a big part of a second half run that they had to put them in position to eventually win that game against Houston. And so when I look at Kentucky, I give Mark Pope credit because clearly there has been a plan going into this offseason. We're going to trade a little bit of skill for a little bit of for a lot of bit of athleticism. And eventually we're just going to believe that our dudes can take over games late when things don't go perfectly. And so it's interesting because I look at the additions via the portal, 5 total additions, right? What stands out to me? 4 of them have major power conference experience. Mo Diabate at Alabama, Jaden Quaintance at ASU. You also have Denzel Aberdeen, who of course comes from Florida. You have Jalen Lowe, who comes from Pitt. Those are 4 dudes out of the 5. Cam Williams, by the way, is clearly a high major player that has NBA draft potential long term. But you add 4 dudes who clearly have high major athleticism, size, skill, toughness, with Otega Owe and Brandon Garrison, 2 guys who came from the power conference level who played with you last year. And then, by the way, now Jasper Johnson, a top 25 prospect, a top 15 prospect, a guy that, was a 5-star. Now he doesn't have to be a superstar, but he's going to add some more. Malachi Moreno is going to add more. That's on top of the other guys. So if you're a Kentucky fan, I think you should actually be really excited about this team because it reminds me a lot of last offseason, right? I remember when Ansley Almanor committed, and I remember when Andrew Carr committed, and it's like, well, Ansley Almanor, he only had this offer. He only had that offer. And it's like, yeah, but Mark Pope is building a team with pieces that fit and with intention. And it's clear that he's doing the same. I love the addition of Denzel Aberdeen. It's going to be a fun year with Kentucky. I just said it a minute ago with Arkansas. Cannot wait to see what this roster looks like in the 2025-2026 season. By the way, producer Matt, you might as well pop up the Matt Norlander tweet from earlier in the day because I do think this is an important note to kind of put a bow on this conversation. Norlander, who is very close with the staff, I think Cody Feger is his guy, said, quote, barring any portal defections, Kentucky has ended its pursuit of all other portal targets. Sources told CBS Sports getting Denzel Aberdeen means they're moving off of Andrei Stojakovic, who we're going to talk about in a minute, Rylan Griffin. Otega Owe is going through the draft process, but I expect him to come back to Lexington. So basically, assuming we get no crazy portal defections, assuming that the 2 remaining 5-star commits in the class of 2025, Malachi Moreno and Jasper Johnson, come back, remember, there is expectation that this is the end for Mark Pope. Tell you what, shout out to Mark Pope. I saw this from my buddy Brandon Ramsey from KSR. Mark Pope getting his first commitment as a Kentucky coach April 21st of 2024, put together the rest of the roster from there. He got maybe his final commitment of the 25-26 roster also on April 21st. So Mark Pope, take off May, go find a beach, enjoy yourself, my man. By the way, the same goes for Coach Cal. I think a lot of these guys that had to put together a roster on a fly last year are largely done. Mark Pope, man, go find a beach. You deserve it because you have been, to the wall since you took the job April 13th of last year. Gets his first commitment last year on April 21st, gets the last one on April 21st of 2025 for next year's roster.